not in the form of uh, disciplined practice, not so much in the form of religion,
Hmm.
but in the form of spirituality and faith. My
Right.
belief in knowing that there is a God
Yeah.
was where it landed. It's hard for me to even say that it was really rooted in Christianity because I hadn't taken the steps to like learn about the Holy Trinity and Jesus and how it fits into this equation. It was basically just, I know there's a God. I'm communicating with it or him or whatever term I was using to try to describe that. And I'm asking for guidance. I'm receiving guidance. I'm receiving strength. That's where it began for me on that first deployment. Christianity and the presence of Jesus in my life really didn't show up for probably another year or two. And that's when I was getting more and more into learning about religion and faith. And because I wanted to amplify the effects that it was already having on me.
Well, but to your point, I mean, I think a lot of people, even with a foundation in church and biblical knowledge, they don't even have the relationship like you just described when you were just talking to God and you knew God was directing you. Like they have maybe the book knowledge for lack of better words, but they don't have that real relationship. So I think it kind of gets watered down. Sometimes people think you've got to have like the credentials to have a
Mm,
relationship with God. And I try to tell people he's everywhere. He wants you to talk to him. You don't have to be in a ritualistic environment or on church every Sunday. Yeah, church is important, obviously, but you can have that relationship with him wherever you are. And it took me a long time to understand that concept, but you dialed that in quick, man. And for you to share that, I think you already had it. Just obviously, the more we know about Scripture, and then we really understand the Holy Trinity, it develops that relationship even further. But just the fact that you had it there, I mean, that says a lot.
that's interesting, man. You're pushing me right now to think and reflect, which I fucking love. Because you're right. I think my introduction to it was very structured and very religious based and had these systems and processes and routines and things that you did, da da da.
Hmm.
And then I went away, and that's not how I got reintegrated. In fact, I got reintegrated kind of from the other, I don't know if it's the side of the spectrum, but it was more relationship based versus practice based. And then I ended up coming full circle where then I wanted to learn and get into a system and having it ingrained in decisions I made and in daily choices that I did. That's going to church, reading the Bible, praying, etc. These kinds of like tasks that you can do to increase the relationship. Mine was structure, hate it, I want to go away. Ooh, there's a relationship here that I need to work on. And I'm just going to kind of keep it fluid without any system, without any structure to it at all, without any religious practice. And then that came after to, I think, kind of amplify it.
Well, and the reason that I say that too, I kind of experienced the same thing growing up. We were at church every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. It was the Church of Christ, which I'm not knocking it, but it was a very legalistic type upbringing. And it made me, when I got into my 20s, kind of go hard left and say, okay, God, what have you done for me? I've done all this for you. And I was bitter. I was prideful and I was, just foolish. And so it took me having to go through trials and tribulations to finally understand, hey, God never left you, man. He's always there. You just gotta go to him. But it took a lot of growth on my part. And so I try to share that. And I'm glad you're sharing this, Nick, because a lot of people that already know who you are, I think need to hear this because they may not go to a church. They might think church is not for me. I'm not worthy of Jesus. And my goal, I feel convicted to spread the gospel in a way that will reach people that maybe wouldn't want to listen to a preacher or a pastor or
Sure.
go to a church building, and that's what I love about men like you that'll come on here and talk about the Lord because it shows you don't have to have that stereotypical church vibe or, whatever background to be a follower of Jesus. And I think that's really important.
So true, brother. In fact, I'll layer on kind of another component to that, which is obviously right in your wheelhouse, and that is mental health as well. I do think, when you come from these kinds of communities, sitting in an office talking to someone with a wall full of degrees, and they may be speaking absolute gold, whether that's a certified PhD psychiatrist or on more of the spirituality faith side, a fully ordained, all of the things from a preacher, a pastor, a priest, choose your individual. And when it is represented from someone that comes from that same environment, specifically because they're not that. I'm not discrediting the importance of having pastors and preachers and priests and professional doctors and therapists. Like, those are great resources. But I think for some, for that message to connect with them, it has to come from a source other than that. And then to amplify it, ideally someone that has lived a similar lifestyle to them, that can get it, that they understand to a
Mhm.
degree what this is like. And so I think that that shows up in the form of spirituality and faith, Christianity, but also mental health, particularly. And one of the things that I love to be able to talk about is that, where it's,
Mhm.
listen, like, you see me, and I say this as humbly as I can, Steve, but you see me as this like ultra, badass, like whatever. And I'd push back against that, pretty aggressively. But okay, great. Like, let's just run with that. Fine. Take that for the way you believe it to be true. Mental health is a struggle and is a challenge. It
Yeah.
takes a real tough individual to be able to recognize that there is a threshold. And if you cross that, the same mentality that made you great at what you did, meaning I'm just going to keep putting one foot in front of the other no matter what, can oftentimes lead to your demise. So it's guys like you, because you live it, you've lived it, and maybe even because you can speak the language and you can represent these kinds of communities, because you're also not that stereotypical resource to some and to many, that allows you to connect with them and impact them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the way I see it too is we all have a testimony. And I think the enemy wants us to stay quiet. And with us sharing our testimony for years. So here's a good example. I was a police officer in the town that I live in currently. I own a business in the same town. And not until I got sober, which is almost 5 years ago, did my clients know I was ever a cop because I went out of that profession in a very bad way. It was public, it was all over the news, and I was ashamed of it, and I didn't want to talk about it. And so as I started healing and getting back into the Lord and being sober, I realized, you know what? Yeah, I did some horrible things, but I'm not my past. Like I've learned from that. And so now, and don't get me wrong, it's still like I was on a podcast last week up in Jersey, and I shared a lot of my story I haven't really done yet. And it was weird, man. It's weird, like telling the dark past and the secrets. But I know that's my way of relating to people. Like, hey, yeah, I was a turd back in the day, but now I have taken the time to put the work in and realize the importance of mental health and the emotional health too. Where I can, if I impact one person, then I feel like I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
You know.
Well said, man. Well,
Thank you.
but you're doing it, bro. You're doing
Thank
it.
you.
That's my
Thank
point,
you.
man. It's important.
Yeah, and I think that, I think more people just need to understand the importance of it. And also too, like don't wait till it's too late. Like some people, like I really had to hit rock bottom before I got serious. And I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful for the lessons and where I'm at. But I think there are some people out there, men and women alike, that are maybe on a point where they could stop and say, hey, maybe I do need to analyze, why do I do these things? Why do I self sabotage? Why am I putting myself above my wife or my kids or whatever it might be? And so I think that's where you raise the awareness and share experiences, and people say, hey, you know what? That guy's like me. I understand that. I've been through that. Um, just my take on it. But yeah.
Dude, I'll close out the thought, man. One of my current life's mission, in business and in life, is to help enable, organizations and individuals to recognize the capacity and capability that they currently have within them without it requiring hitting rock bottom to recognize what you're capable of. That's easier said than done.
Yeah.
It's such a common cliche story of, no, I had to hit rock bottom
Hmm.
with my back truly against the wall with no other real option other than like death for me to tap into what I was already capable of prior to hitting rock bottom.
Hmm.
That's the hard reality. Oftentimes it does take that point. For you, an example for me would be losing my leg. People are like,
Hmm.
how'd you, how did you do this? How'd you do that? Like the discipline and the work ethic and the consistency. And it's like, for me, it took that point. I had to get my leg ripped off by a machine gun, decide I was going to go back to a Green Beret on an ODA in combat, and molded those two things together to tap into a whole nother level of productivity, work ethic, consistency, sacrifice, etc. But the frustrating part is that I was able to do all of that already. It just took this as kind of that catalyst, that kind of wake up for me to tap into it. And so
Uh,
again, man, it is of course easier said than done, but what I love is when you start to see those light bulbs go off in people's eyes and their hearts and their souls, like, you know what? Yeah, like I can be more, I can do more. It is doable before it having to get to a point where the wheels are almost falling off or they've already fallen off.
I mean, that's awesome, and I think that's definitely if you can get that formula down, that's gonna help a lot of people and save them a lot of, headache and, you know, for lack of better words, collateral damage, especially when it comes to being a man that's married and has a family. If they can kinda catch that before they get to that rock bottom point and, maybe not impact their children or their spouse or whoever, you know,
Yeah.
in a negative way. That's awesome that you're doing that, man. That's
Yeah, man.
incredible.
Thank you.